Welcome, everyone, back to Go Wild, your avian nutrition podcast. I'm Jason Crean, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Dr. Evie Voltura. Hey, Evie.
Hey Jason, how are you doing? Glad to be
It's
here.
it's been a while.
Yes.
Life in the sciences has taken its toll on both of us, I think. So we have been
Yes.
very busy, but we definitely wanted to keep this going. So we thought a place where there's been a lot of discussion lately is teas and using teas in bird husbandry. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about that today. This will probably be the first of at least a few talks, episodes on teas, because we want to talk about um, from the standpoint of the bird, like, what the effects are. So we'll probably do one on anti-inflammatory teas or components, so at some point, and hormone balance, which I know some of you are begging for, especially in the spring. So we'll talk more about those things as we go. But we wanted to just kind of talk about what do birds drink in the wild, and this is what they drink in the wild. They don't drink from a purified Brita filter. They drink from rain catches and puddles. Birds in your own neighborhood, you've probably seen drinking from puddles that are full of leaves, leaching components into the water. A lot of birds come from environments where there's low iron and other minerals in the soil, especially rainforests where rain is washing things away. I know, Evie, you've studied some of these things. Um,
Mhm.
and so we want to try and replicate these things in the wild because these birds are wild animals. They haven't evolved to be in human care. So we want to replicate as much as we can. Um, and there's nutrients in here. If you look at the bottom right, there's an oil slick across the top of that water. And that means there's probably lipids, some kind of lipid component leaching into there. So fats, some kind of oils, plant-based, obviously. So these are things that we want to replicate as best we can. My journey with teas started working with toucans, which are notoriously iron sensitive, and breeding them, um, in particular green RSRs. This one here on the right is Cricket. Cricket was my first RSRA that I got in the 90s, and she fell prey to iron storage disease. And working with Dr. Karen Becker, the world's most followed veterinarian for very good reason, came up with a treatment for her that included phlebotomy, drawing some blood, but also a proactive T regimen. And we kept her alive 3.5 years beyond her diagnosis, which is really unheard of. And so way back then, we started thinking about tea. I've been blending teas for animals for about 20 years now, um, mostly for other companies and for other people in zoos and things like that, up until somewhat recently where I started my own line. But we've been talking about the benefits of tea for quite some time. I had a black palm that had a heart issue, and we used decaffeinated black tea to help support her cardiovascular health. And then offering it to different species, lemurs and rhinos, for example, also iron sensitive species. And European zoos have been using teas in their husbandry for a very long time. And that's actually where Dr. Becker learned about tea when she was doing her internship at Berlin Zoo. So all of this education came from practical use over time. And now I bundle these teas together so that you get the maximum benefit from all those different components. It just looks fun, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It's
It looks
enriching.
beautiful. It's not only attractive, it's good for you on multiple levels. I love it.
Yep. And smells amazing.
Yes.
So why tea? So like we said, animals drink tea in the wild. They're not drinking purified water. And there's lots of components in their water that they're drinking from plants mainly. Iron sensitive species have adapted to maximizing iron absorption because they live in environments where iron's low and they need some iron. So then when we feed them iron rich diets, they can't process it because they haven't adapted to that. So We need to make sure that we're combating that, and we have to do that proactively, as we'll talk about shortly, and not reactively. We need to make sure that we're giving them a good start. Evie can speak to this more than I can because she literally published a paper on it last year. But animals consume more than just seeds, nuts, and fruits, which is what we hear a lot about. They consume a huge variety of things. I try to quote your paper all the time, and I always get like I can't remember all the numbers because the data is so huge. It's just so big. But things like I think it was 71% of parrot species in the research you found ate foliage, like leaves, which
Yeah, I think it was even higher than that for
probably is because I
foliage.
can't remember all the numbers.
Yeah, no, but yeah, all these different plant parts besides the reproductive parts of plants that we associate, for example, mostly parrots eating, but we're also looking at, as we see present in some of the water sources that these birds are drinking from, wood and even things like lichen or fungus that could potentially be having kind of stewed in those watering holes. But what's interesting about this is that the phytochemicals in these plant parts, when we're not talking about insects and other things, are quite different profile wise from some of the more traditional items. So that's where I think we see this tea really shining, is that the variety of teas that are out there can be proxies in that they can be similar plant families or orders that may have some of those same phytochemicals that are otherwise missing from the typical nutrients that we consider when we're formulating diets for our animals.
Yeah, and all those different phytochemicals act on animal tissue in different ways, so it's beneficial to have the wide range, just like what we normally would think of feeding wise, right? A wide range of foods. It's the same for teas.
And it's the
Um,
same thing with us, right?
yes.
That diverse diet is very important because all of these, especially in the plant-based portion of the diet, it's like we say, eat across the color spectrum. Well, it's not the colors really that we care about, right? It's the chemicals that are that we visually are signaled to be drawn to because they are nutrient and phytochemical rich. So that's what's interesting about some of these is it's not just for our animals. We can learn for our own selves how to be more conscious of what we're eating, not only for nutrition, but other health benefits, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you bring up eating the rainbow. That's how we kind of perceive what certain things have in it, right? Like red, yellow, orange vegetables, we know are beta carotene rich, and that's a phytochemical, right? That's a component that's beneficial. Um, you've got bioflavonoids. Like every time I hear bioflavonoids, I think of flowers like hibiscus and roses and rose hips, as well as blueberries and berries in general. Those strongly colored things, those pigments carry benefits. So it's important that we're eating the rainbow, like Levy said, even though it's very I don't know, pie in the sky kind of saying. It's very true. Like it helps us better understand what these components are in these different foods. So the research in this presentation, a lot of it is published for human benefit, even though we use animal models. And that's why extrapolation is so important. Extrapolation is common practice in science. I often hear people say, and this usually proves to me that they don't understand how science works, and I'm sure you've heard this too, Evie, that, oh, well, that study's done on mice, so that doesn't count, those types of things. That's not how science works. Science works based on extrapolation. A lot of what we know about human health was done on animal models. If we see effects on liver health in rodents, we can extrapolate that to a host of different species. That's why we use animal models. So
Yes, these connections are what we call translational models, right? So There are some cases where translational models don't work very well, but in case of nutrition, I think we see a pretty strong ability to extrapolate what's going on in animals and in humans, or even vice versa. So, some animals may not be studied as well as others, and in our case, we can look at a range of things from parrots in particular are interesting as a translational model because they're like us, long-lived, cognitively complex, omnivorous, um, and have these highly social lives. So, a lot of our overall health goes back to nutrition. So what are the connections of studying, looking at the difference between birds and humans, but especially parrots, I think are an interesting one. I always go back to parrots, but that's just it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the effects will be similar, but there may be there may be variations in the degree of magnitude,
Yes.
right? How much impact. So it may have a greater effect on one species over another, but the effect is still there. And when it comes to parrot health and what we've learned over these last several decades, we know that they need liver support almost always. Like there's always some kind of liver issue going on in many of these species. Um, and
Cardiovascular support,
cardiovascular support,
hormone
atherosclerosis,
support.
particular hormone support. So we know that these things exist, and there's ways to be proactive and give birds a really good start. And it's something as simple as offering this as their water for part of the day. So we'll talk more about that later. There's two categories of tea. There's camellia teas, which we typically think of as tea. And that plant, the camellia plant, gives you green, black, white, and a tea called oolong. And then herbal teas. The difference, there's many, many differences depending on which one you're talking about. Camellia teas have caffeine, and you have to have those organically decaffeinated. I'll talk about that in a second. But organically decaffeinated teas are completely safe for birds. Herbal teas generally don't have caffeine. They have a lot of other great components, but they generally don't have caffeine. But camellia plants do. It's a natural compound, organic compound. But we'll talk about that in a bit. So the camellia plant's a small evergreen shrub. It's primarily grown in Japan and China, across Asia. But there are people who grow them, even here in Florida. There are people that grow tea plants here and harvest their own tea. The harvested leaves produce the different types of teas, but it depends on when the leaf is picked and then how they process that tea. Sometimes they mix it with oils and let it dry. Sometimes they just air dry it. White tea is picked before the leaf even unrolls, so it's very potent. It's very young and fresh tea, and that has a lot of benefits. But generally, what we're offering to birds is decaffeinated black and decaffeinated green. So let's talk a little bit about black tea. Black tea is, I believe, the second most consumed beverage on the planet by humans after water. Believe it or not. I'm surprised soda isn't up there, but tea is drunk is really, yeah, it's drink all over the world.
Yeah, I believe it.
So black tea is also very old. I mean, people have been drinking this for thousands of years. And there's a story out of China about it, but I'm not going to tell it right now. But it's basically found that it has a lot of health benefits because of the phytochemicals that are found within the tea leaf. So the first one, antioxidants. We know that people who drink black tea generally have a lower incidence of heart disease, and we'll talk about what the research tells us. But that's mainly because the antioxidants that you find in black tea promote healthy blood flow because they keep the blood vessels supple. They keep them flexible, and that helps blood flow. And we see atherosclerosis more and more in birds, especially African grays. We keep seeing it. And this is definitely something that could be offered to help stave that off. But they found, the International Journal of Food Science, and just this year published a paper that found that the flavonoids reduce the incidence of those hardening of the arteries, atherosclerosis. And what they said was findings from clinical trials indicated that consuming black tea regularly enhances endothelial and vascular health, notably by improving flow-mediated vasodilation. These advantages are largely due to the tea's antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and gut microbiota modulating effects. So when you think about all of that, it's antioxidants, which help keep cells clean and healthy. Those problem causers that, are
Free
waste
radicals,
product,
it's
free
fighting those
radicals.
free radicals.
I know I always say free radicals, and then people are like, "What are free radicals?" So it's
Yeah,
like hard
sorry.
to it's hard to describe what electrons, these problem-causing
They're just
electrons are in
bad
those.
things floating
They're just
around.
they're a product of waste in the cells, and if your cells can't get rid of that waste, then they cause problems. So antioxidants help clear those up. Anti-inflammatory is self-explanatory, and then gut microbiota modulating effects. So you and I have talked a lot about the microbiome and the gut flora, all this beneficial bacteria and fungal um, colonies that exist in animal guts in particular are connected, and we're finding more and more through science that they're connected, heavily connected to all the major body systems. And that
Yes,
includes the nervous system. And so
especially.
especially, yeah. So the microbiota modulating means it's helping balance the microbiota, all that gut bacteria, so that it's balanced. It's not if it's off
You're not
balance.
seeing these wild swings in the composition. And you one of the things I wanted to bring up is that one of the reasons why this healthy gut microflora is so important, you guys, is that each of the species of bacteria or fungi that are present in your flora are specialists at breaking down certain nutrients that we ourselves cannot break down. So without a healthy gut microflora, your body is not nearly as efficient at extracting and then making available in the GI tract and subsequently your blood and all these different organ systems. It just doesn't function as efficiently. So that's why, if your gut microbiome is completely off, um, you may be eating some of the things that you need, but your body is not able to extract and utilize those nutrients as efficiently as you need. So, with a stable microbiome, you should have, a fairly diverse flora that is able to support the digestion and breakdown and making available of this diverse range of nutrients that we really need to be being exposed to on a fairly regular basis. It doesn't mean every day, but when your body's prepared and well modulated is when you're really going to maximize all these nutrients that you're potentially bringing into your body if you are providing the right environment for these flora to survive.
Yep. Yeah, and I talk about the gut is basically an ecosystem. And
Yes.
just like the rainforest, if certain species die off, the
Mhm.
jobs they're leaving, their niches, are then
Mhm.
left undone, which causes kind of a cascade effect and can cause problems. And that's just what's going on in our gut. And I would argue most people on a Western diet are probably imbalanced. And that is why we have so many heart disease, obesity, and things like that, because that microbiome is off. So if we could help modulate that, make it balanced for birds, you probably won't see things like plucking and self-mutilation and other nervous and anxiety just type disorders, as well as better skin and feather quality and things like that. So
Mhm.
black tea helps balance that. The tannins in black tea also chelate heavy metals, and that's really beneficial, particularly for iron sensitive birds. Um, and the
And
current, yeah,
the great thing about this, for everybody to be aware of, is that with the interest in your birds chewing on the paint on their cages, if you don't have a stainless steel cage, some of those, especially older cages, may have some not so great chemicals bound into paint. So this is really beneficial for a general chelation of not only your iron sensitive species, but any of your birds that are chewing things that maybe you don't want them to be chewing. So this is a great resource to combat not only that, but other things that they may be chewing on that you're not aware of what the chemical composition is of those objects. So this is a great insurance policy.
Or just tasting. Like
Yes,
I
it doesn't
did
take
not
much.
know, like years ago, I had an eclectus and he got zinc toxicity.
Hmm.
And guess where we found the zinc? On the stainless steel foraging bucket that he had. So even with
Yeah.
stainless steel, I recommend people wipe it down with a really strong vinegar
Mhm.
solution before they offer it to birds, just because a lot of the stainless steel is produced in places where other metals are.
Yep.
And some of the metal is coming from the machines that are creating the stainless steel products too. So um, yeah, they're
Yeah, the
coming
main
into contact with these things. So let's be proactive once again and help them chelate those.
and this, especially those of you who have birds that are rehomed and you don't know their history, this is also a really great practice for them. I feel like because they may have some subtle heavy metal toxicity that you're unaware of without going to go do the specialized blood panel. And kind of like with us too, on a daily basis, we're exposed to an abundance of toxicants. And that is why we see, as you're showing these great health benefits in humans as well.
Um, there, if you see this and you're worried that it's going to block all of the good things from your bird, that's false. Um, the tannins that typically will bind to things that are problematic, like lead and zinc and iron, those heavy metals, but they're not going to block other important minerals from, um, and keep your bird from absorbing them like calcium. There's actually research that shows that it has black tea has beneficial effects on bone mineral density, especially in women with osteoporosis. So that it's going to help with that. It's not going to block that. So
Which is
um,
amazing.
I know it's great stuff. So adding a phthalate or tannic acid or both to readily available foodstuffs may be a practical alternative to more expensive low iron diets. So the Journal of Avian Medicine and Surgery, even back in 2006, was looking at low iron diets, which are going to have iron. There's no way to get around it. They're going to have iron. Processed foods that are enriched are bound to have it. And what they found was you can add tea to the food so that it's regularly ingested, and that can have the positive benefit of blocking that iron. So adding black tea to the diet is really a great deterrent, and it's being proactive. The Journal of Avian Medicine and Surgery found that the study that they looked at, particularly with captive toucans, found that iron overload from feeding a commercial diet may contribute to the development of iron storage, um, even if it's low iron. And so iron is, like I said, inherently in these processed foods. It's hard to get away. Like even the breads that we eat are enriched. Anytime you see enriched, you're probably going to see see a more iron, which is another reason not to feed your birds that type of people food.
And
Um,
there are also like point out certain foods are highly iron rich naturally. So our green stuffs are things that you generally want to avoid with our iron rich foods. And that is part of the reason that you'll see it in other foods that contain those green foods that would be good for non-iron sensitive species are not necessarily good for your iron sensitive species.
right, right. So when they looked at adding tannins from the teas to the low iron diet, it had no impact on stored liver iron concentrations. That means that once the iron is seated in the liver, the tea won't get it out. So it's really important that you're being proactive in adding the tea beforehand in the food as the drink so that it's binding to the iron before it seeds in the liver. And so I tell people all the time, get your bird on a tea regimen, make it part of their daily routine. Once you do it, it's so easy. It's so easy. Just do it, and your bird will be much more better for it. And then finally, the Journal of Zoo and Wildlife Medicine found that their results showed that both dietary iron level and duration of time influenced hepatic iron storage, which means iron stored in the liver. The controlled iron diet still allowed accumulation of hepatic iron in an 8-week period. So they found even low iron diets, they found within 8 weeks you could see iron accumulation in the liver. So low iron diets are not all they're cracked up to be. So it's important that we're offering teas, and these tannins from teas are going to have this benefit for low iron, for iron sensitive species, but also all the other health benefits can benefit all of your birds. So yeah. Other research, this study here looked at over 37,000 people over 13 years. And what they found was the more tea you consumed, the less risk you had of cardiovascular disease. Now, this is a no-brainer for us because we see this in the research, right? Like, this is old news. Tea has been studied for a very long time, and we know the benefits of it. But when it comes to extrapolating those benefits to our birds, we now have a lot of evidence that can support that.
And again, this goes back to the parrots again, another long-lived species that we often see cardiovascular complications in, especially things like atherosclerosis. So this is another great reason to incorporate this practice into caring for your birds that, especially like all of them really, but the ones that are really long lived, this could really improve their cardiovascular health. And I don't know if you've ever had friends or family that you've seen go through end of life with severe cardiovascular complications. It's very uncomfortable. It's not fun to watch, and anything we can do to support the health of these birds when they are so long lived, just like us, I think is a win for keeping these amazing animals in our lives, and also, of course, for zoos and breeding programs where you have particularly high value genetics involved. You really want those to live as long as possible, all of them to live as long as possible. But this is just one really good example of, one of the many benefits that this the teas can provide. And this is, of course, just one group of teas, right?
Yeah. And not just longevity, but quality of life, right? Because
Yes.
you and I have
Thank
talked a
you.
lot about surviving versus thriving, and
Yes.
our birds should be thriving. I see a lot of birds surviving, and a lot of people think that's good enough, but it's not to me. I need birds thriving. I want them to have the best life they possibly can, and we can totally make that happen. And this
Yeah.
is one way, by offering them these phytochemicals that are found within these teas that can help give them that boost, that health boost,
Yes.
in so many different ways. Speaking of health boost, European Journal of Clinical Nutrition looked at black tea. They evaluated evidence, kind of a meta study across the research, and what they found was that there's evidence that shows a benefit to bone mineral density. So those naysayers who are like, "Oh, it's going to block calcium and other nutrients," it doesn't. It
Actually,
actually
yeah,
helps.
we're seeing the reverse,
Yes,
basically,
we're
which
seeing the
is
reverse.
fabulous.
Exactly. And there's sufficient evidence to say that black tea decreases heart disease. And that, quote, there was no credible evidence that black tea was harmful. And so no evidence that black tea is harmful to normal animal physiology. And so this shows us it's safe. There's really no side effects, and the benefits are many. So we can hear people saying all kinds of things against offering tea to birds. None of them are founded. None of them are rooted in what science tells us. There are huge benefits across the board. And what's nice about these natural plant compounds is that you don't see the side effects. You don't see the side effects that you would from a pharmaceutical or whatnot.
Exactly.
I see people who are like, "Oh, my vet's telling me to put the bird on Luperon or, some other kind of pharmaceutical to either dope them up when it comes to anxiety issues or um, do something about their
Hormones, or
hormones from excessive egg laying or whatnot."
and
And there's many
that's not
things
to
you can
say those
try.
things don't have a time and a place, but it's
Yes.
much easier on the body and may actually be more effective for your bird to try these kinds of tools that are in your toolkit, things that, if you're not providing your birds with these other plant compounds, or you don't know if they're getting them, this is a really easy way to give their bodies an easy way to adjust to a more natural state. And again, like, that's not to say if you have to get your bird a Lupron shot that you're a bad person. Like, that, we don't want anybody to think that. But use all the natural tools in your kit um as much as possible to really try to support um that natural state of being that will hopefully make both your bird much more happy and therefore you and your wallet more happy.
Yes. I one of the things I loved about Dr. Becker was her pharmacy. And she talked about her pharmacy being a spectrum, and it would go from the most natural components here all the way to the most pharmaceutical over here. And she would always start here and then
Yep.
work. So, giving the animal the very best natural way. And we use the word natural kind of loosely, but like
Yeah.
giving their body a way to adjust to what's going on and heal itself before adding some kind of foreign chemical to the body that's going
And often
to
still keeping that natural part of the arsenal in place while adding some of the other stuff,
supporting it.
because
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course there are disease states that can be problematic and you may need some of that stuff like you said, but giving the whole body room to function as efficiently as it can elsewhere. I love that. And I think we're seeing that in human medicine more too, right? That not just jumping to drugs or only relying on drugs. It's your diet and lifestyle choices that your bird can't make necessarily for itself. These are good choices you can make for them, or offer them the choice to be able to voluntarily participate in consuming these things. And it's nice because there's a big variety of things to try, and there's no shortage of flavors and types and variety to give the birds something to try. Sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge to get them to try new things, but I think you'd be surprised once they're exposed to new things repeatedly, they get a little more, oh, like, what's this new thing to try? And I do think it's like us, you kind of figure it out when you're feeling better after some changes. I don't know. I'd say it's an interesting pattern.
And a lot of that discussion, I think, started during the pandemic. I saw doctors, including my own, start to send out information about the benefits of D3 and sunlight on the immune system,
Mhm.
where many wouldn't talk about that beforehand. And I remember getting an article on turmeric and piperine, black pepper, and thinking, wow, they're talking about a natural component to add to the diet, or however you want to get it in, um, as being proactive, because medicine in this country typically is not proactive. It's very reactive medicine. And
Mhm.
so to talk about those things and say, maybe the sun isn't evil. Maybe we do need a little bit of sunlight. Like we know our birds do, like we do too, right? It's just too much of a good thing can be problematic, as like with anything. But like we need some sun. And we see its effect on people's moods and their brain chemistry. And then D3, which is really difficult to get in the diet, for birds in particular, um, is something that they can manufacture themselves through some sunlight. And it could be just, if you live in the north and you can only have your bird out for a few months a year, let them build up some D3 so that they can, have some when winter comes, that type of thing. So
Mhm.
it's interesting that we are talking about more of these quote unquote natural components,
Finally.
even though, well, and they're not witchcraft. Like when I started talking about teas 20 years ago for birds, people were like, "Oh, I can see you, over toil and trouble, brewing something in a
Yeah,
cauldron or
Jay, I
something."
can
And I'm like,
imagine Jason with
"No,
his wizard hat.
yeah." And I'm like, "Well, no, they're like this is all rooted in science. Like we know what the stuff is, but um, you can't patent it and make
Well,
a huge profit from it like you can pharmaceuticals." So that's often where a lot of the science isn't supported. Like you and I would love to do studies on nutrition, but we're focused on raw whole food nutrition, for example, and you can't patent broccoli,
right,
and like
right.
say broccoli, here's broccoli's benefits for birds, that type of thing. So
Gonna patent broccoli.
yeah,
Super broccoli. It's gonna
yeah,
be rainbow broccoli, and it's
yes,
gonna grow like a leaf of black tea, a leaf of herbal tea. Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So black tea is beneficial to any bird, especially iron sensitive species. I mix it in with my Lori nectar. Um, there's a Lori nectar now that actually mixes it in, which is great. Minas, starlings, toucans, we give it to them to drink, but we also will mix it in with their food. I actually have a whole food powder that has decaffeinated black tea in it, called Hemo Helper, that you can sprinkle on their food. That's also beneficial. So any way that you can get those beneficial compounds into the birds is great, but brewing definitely releases a lot of the things and makes them more accessible to the bird's biology. So how do we offer tea? That's Rad. He's my brown Lori. And he gets tea. He has the tea right in his powder. Uh, we
That
use
is a happy
we
Lori right
use
there.
Lori's Choice. Yeah, he's a very good eater. But for decades,
They tend to be good eaters.
sorry,
They tend to be good eaters.
I have had some that were very finicky with
Really?
different
Interesting.
products. Yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, I have. But for decades, a lot of zoological institutions have been offering black tea to a wide range of animals, like I said earlier, lemurs, rhinos, all the iron sensitive birds. But if you're offering black tea, it's got to be organic and decaffeinated. In all of my formulations, we use organically decaffeinated black tea or green tea, depending on the blend. We brew it to drink. That's the best way. You can cold brew or hot brew. Cold brewing is really easy. You can throw a handful of the tea into a pitcher of filtered water, cap it, and just leave it on your counter overnight and just let it slow brew and then strain off whatever's in there. Throw that in your chop so that the birds can consume those pieces, and then you've got tea for the week. Never use boiling water. Boiling water will destroy nutrients, but if you're going to hot brew, that'll be faster. But I definitely recommend cold brewing. And then mixing with food, you can sprinkle directly on the food as a supplement. You can add it to moist foods. I take handfuls of different types of tea blends that I formulate, and I mix it right into their sprouts with their veggies and everything, so it sticks to everything. So that just layers nutrition right onto already beneficial foods. So caffeine, birds do not need another stimulant.
Yeah,
I think I
I
think of
think of my Kaiques on caffeine,
yes,
and my mind just goes
that would be a great band name, like a heavy metal band.
the
Cayuse on
caffeinated
caffeine.
Kaiques.
Yes.
The caffeinated Kaiques.
Oh my God, can you
I think
imagine?
everybody who had a Kaique would run.
Yes, yes. So green, black, oolong, and white teas, like I said earlier, are from the camellia plant, which naturally has caffeine in it. So if we're offering any of those teas to birds, they need to be organically decaffeinated. Now, the reason I say organic and decaffeinated is because if they're not organically decaffeinated, they use chemicals to remove the caffeine. We don't need we don't need any more chemicals. We just need to remove it. So when it's organically decaffeinated, they use water and carbon dioxide to decaffeinate the tea, which retains the polyphenols, those beneficial phytochemicals.
That's vital.
Unlike,
That's
yes,
vital.
yes, unlike other non-organic decaffeinated teas. So we use human grade organic decaffeinated black and green for our blends without fail. All other teas besides the camellia plant, the green and black tea, for example, all other teas are considered herbals and they're naturally caffeine free. Now, green tea also comes from the same plant. It's just those leaves are pulled sooner than black tea, but they contain a lot of those polyphenols that we just mentioned, which are antioxidants, and they scavenge those problem causers from the cells and help keep cells healthy and clean. They're 20, what they have found in green tea studies is that they're 20 to 30 times more potent in green tea than they are a vitamin E supplement. And that's saying something because vitamin
Yeah,
E
that's amazing.
usually, yeah, that's usually pretty powerful stuff. Green tea also has vitamin C, which is great for immune health. It lowers the bad and increases the good cholesterol. I drink nothing but green tea. I drink black tea, iced tea, like at dinner sometimes, but I mean, I'm drinking green tea all day long, and my cholesterol flipped. Like it was
Same.
amazing. And um, yeah, because I'm prone to having it high. Um, Reduces blood pressure, and then it has nutrients. So it has carotenes because it's a leaf. It has B vitamins, also like folic acid. It has minerals like
That
manganese.
manganese is great to see. I know a lot of people really think about magnesium as being important, but that manganese is an important one in Avian
Yep.
nutrition. So great source.
Yep. And it's not just these. There's more, but these are the ones that they're typically associating with green tea. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition looked at green tea and found that it increased energy expenditure and fat oxidation. Now, this is why people often drink green tea when they're trying to lose weight, because it helps increase the energy expenditure, which is burning fat. It's converting fat to energy. Um, the American Association for Cancer Research found that green tea prevents gene damage. And if you are familiar with the concept of mutation, a lot of cancers can form as a result of mutation in our genes. So, in order to keep our genes from mutating, we need to be on a healthy diet, and these polyphenols can help prevent that um, from happening. It contains epigallocatechin 3 gallate, which is EGCG. Sometimes they call this green tea extract, um, but the extract is not as powerful as if you're just drinking the green tea because it's a whole food. But what they found that EGCG has effect on is slowing angiogenesis. Now, this is where cancerous tumors will form and they can't continue to grow without tapping into the host blood supply and nourishing themselves. So,
Right.
angiogenesis is very dangerous stage of cancer, and so EGCG shows that it slows that. It kind of helps prevent that from occurring. And then just like black tea, which shouldn't be surprised because it's from the same plant, but it helps reduce heart disease and incident of stroke because its effects on keeping your blood vessels healthy. It also inhibits lipid peroxidation. Um, and that lipid, how do I explain lipid peroxidation? It basically is where these problem causing molecules or free radicals attack the lipids that form the cell membrane, which is basically the two layers of fats that surround every cell in the animal body. And that can lead to a host of different types of disorders, including hardening of the arteries, which is atherosclerosis. I guarantee this particular model here is probably what's affecting something like African grays, especially because I see
Yeah.
them eating these really high fat diets. And
Mhm.
I'm talking animal fats more than, seed or nut fats. But, I see a lot of people offering like whole chicken bones and things like that to their birds. And it's like, that is a lot of fat. So,
Right.
and fat that they're not necessarily able to metabolize like they could plant-based fats in
Mhm.
seeds and nuts. So definitely want to get them on green tea to help with any kind of fatty liver issue that's beneficial for that as well.
So
Um,
like your monk parakeets, guys, they're
yeah,
super prone to this. Your
yeah.
African grays, super prone to
Amazons.
this.
Yeah,
Amazons.
yeah,
Yeah, good stuff.
yeah. So there's a host of different things that I use in formula for when I formulate teas for birds. I thought I would highlight the top ones that I use so you can kind of see, um, kind of get a survey of what's available. But as you can see from the pictures here, it's not just a leaf. There's flowers, there's fruits, there's seeds and pods, there's roots. So every part of the plant potentially has the potential for being beneficial. And some plants have, roots that are very beneficial. Some have leaves that are very beneficial, for example. Um, Chamomile is one that's very commonly offered to birds. It's calming because it has apigenin in it. And this specifically interacts with receptors in nerve cells to calm them. And because of that effect on the nervous system, it also has the benefit for digestion.
Hmm.
So if you were raised by anyone from the old world, you will know that chamomile solved everything. If you can't sleep, you drink chamomile. If you have an upset stomach, you drink chamomile, and it does work. It's very beneficial. I think that
I
most
wonder if there's
birds,
a I wonder if there's a microbiome connection here that hasn't been explored.
I would expect there is.
Me too.
Well, I would expect there is probably from a lot of these,
Yeah.
because of the phytochemicals that each one, the unique composition that each one has. But um, chamomile, if I could put this into an IV for birds, I would. Like it's just so beneficial and can be such a helpful tool for people that are frustrated with their bird because it has some undesirable behaviors, screaming or just acting out, feather plucking and mutilation, things like that. This can really help calm the nervous system. It's not going to sedate your bird. It's not going to drug up your bird, right? This is using these naturally occurring components, um, often just help with balance. They're not going to make your bird go to either extreme. I wouldn't be using it if that was the case. But chamomile is a really beneficial one to have in your toolbox.
Tried and
Calendula,
true.
sorry?
Tried and true.
Yes, for hundreds of years.
Yes.
um, Calendula. Calendula is, they call them pot marigolds, but they're not marigolds. But they are, as you can see, a gold flower, and that means that they're rich in beta carotenes. And so you can get these carotenoids through the water. The birds can also consume the brood flower as well. But calendula has compounds that are anti-inflammatory. You can currently buy at most pharmacies right now over the counter calendula-based gel, creams, things like that, because they speed wound healing because of the compounds that are there. I remember I became a believer in calendula many, many years ago. I had a bird, a linealated parakeet that had got caught on a toy and had a gash in its leg, and brought it to the vet. Dr. Becker prescribed a calendula spray, sprayed it on there. A week later, you could not even see like it was healed up. It was just so efficient. I was like, this is like magic. I've never seen anything like this. So, um, needless to say, calendula has a lot of benefits. I think it's also great for skin and skin health. It's great for pain because of the anti-inflammatory compounds. There's some research that even looked at women who are going through breast cancer radiation treatments and things like that, and they found that this reduced pain. So lots of benefits when it comes to calendula. Red clover has isoflavones that are responsible for balancing hormones. And it's also an anti-inflammatory. I tend to use these three in concert when I'm looking at birds that are self-mutilating, plucking or chewing or anything like that. These three together, along with some other things, are part of my plumage perfection tea. And that's specifically because it calms the mind and the tissue. You can't
Mhm.
do, I have found you can't do one or the other. You need
No, it's
kind of a
not.
holistic approach to it. So I use these three plus some others that will like Royobos, which we'll talk about in a second, that will help provide the birds what they need. Rose and rose hips. Rose hips are fruity, so if you want to get a bird drinking tea, you just add rose hips. That's often a gateway. Um,
The
even
gateway tea.
huh?
The gateway tea.
Yes, it helps. It helps a lot. But rose and rose hips are known for anti-inflammatory compounds, also high in vitamin C, so they're going to help support the immune system as well. Peppermint. There's a reason why there's peppermints at the restaurant on the counter when you leave, because they're known to help calm digestion. I wouldn't recommend grabbing those peppermints because they're probably full of E. coli with everybody's hands in those bowls. But anyway, peppermints in general, peppermint, the herb, is very beneficial for digestive health, calming. It has an anti-inflammatory effect on the digestive system because of its action on the nervous system. And then it's antimicrobial as well. The peppermint oil is often used in natural cleaners and things like that as well. So peppermint can have a lot of benefits. I love mixing things like peppermint, oregano, and other types of dried grains in with my sprouts to keep them fresh for the week. I keep them in a sealed container. I have that in my green forage blend, so that I can just throw a handful in, mix it all together, and it keeps everything fresh. Star anise is interesting because it's not the seed that's got the benefits, it's actually the pod itself. So you have to brew the whole pod. And in the pod, there is a compound called shikimic acid, and that's actually the active ingredient in Tamiflu. So it has a great benefit on the respiratory system. I mix this in with peppermint and some other things for seasonal allergies. I have friends that have like Amazons who just get
I
get hay
guess.
fever basically. They get this seasonal
Okay,
allergies when they're outside, and giving them this tea takes care of it. So um, that those combinations are probably because they're anti-inflammatory, but that helps with seasonal allergies among other things. Also antimicrobial. Raspberry leaf. You and I were talking about raspberry leaf before we started recording today.
that's
Um,
an amazing one.
if you have a
Makes so
female
much.
bird, you should have raspberry leaf tea on hand all the time. This helps with hormone balance. But what's interesting is fragrine. Fragrine is a compound found in raspberry leaf that helps tone muscular contraction. So it helps tone the uterus, and helps with it's like an antispasmodic, I guess you could say. But we have offered this to birds as tiny as little finches who were egg bound, and they safely passed the egg because of it. Um, we were talking earlier about me. I was doing a consult at a zoo, and they had a gorilla that had problems with labor in the past, and she was currently pregnant. They offered this the day after I was there, and they sent me a picture of her having given birth. Baby was still attached by the cord, and they said, "Well, I guess the tea works." So raspberry leaf helps stimulate those uterine contractions. It helps tone the uterus. It helps with cramping and things like that. But if you have a female bird, and even male birds will benefit from this because it really is about balance. It's about hormone balance. So I'll give this, it never ceases. Like every spring I start getting calls about Amazons
Yep.
that have yellow in their name, double yellowhead or yellow nape or whatever, the most hormonal birds ever. and and I have people saying like this bird just gets crazy this time of year, and I say put it on hormone homeostasis that has different components in there that include raspberry leaf that will help balance the hormones and get them out of that extreme mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rooibos tea is mineral rich, really great for minerals, and it has a high level of antioxidants as a result of that. Rooibos is typically grown at higher elevations, typically in South Africa, for example. and it's a really popular tea. It's not often, it's one of those teas that offered by itself isn't often accepted well, maybe because of the taste, but when mixed with other teas, has a huge benefit. So definitely, I'm very big on blending. You need to
Yeah,
blend teas
and
together.
the antioxidant benefit is there.
Yeah,
So
if they're drinking one tea, why not add more, right? Why not give them
Mhm.
more of a benefit? It's just easier. So all the teas that I formulate are specifically for birds, knowing what these ingredients are. One ingredient that you don't want too much of is lavender. And lavender is a relaxant. Even the smell of lavender is enough often to calm you or your bird down. I know, for years people would throw a handful of lavender flowers into their pillowcase to help them sleep. They sell lavender oil and things like that to help you sleep. But it is a relaxant, and that it also contains coumarin, which can act as blood thinners. So you don't want too much lavender. So when I add lavender, I know how much I'm adding to the formulation, to make sure that they're getting the benefit, but not getting too much of any one thing. Dandelion leaf, these bitter greens, birds love these bitter greens. Give them this whole leaf as part of their diet. If you're going to do chop and you have dandelion growing in your yard, do the
Yeah,
whole plant.
on your dandelions.
Dandelion, the entire plant from root to flower, leaves, everything is edible, everything's beneficial. But dandelion leaf has components that support all those filtering organs. So it's great for liver health. It's great for gallbladder health, for you and your cockatoos. Other birds don't have gallbladders, but whatever. And then kidneys. So dandelion has a lot of benefits. And I make sure that dandelion's part of my chop as much as it can be because they really like the bitter greens. They're also incredibly easy to grow. You can grow chicory, which is Italian dandelion. You can get those seeds on Amazon. They grow them in a bed. They just grow anywhere in clumps, and give them to your birds. But dandelion leaf, really beneficial. Jasmine, they call these dragon pearls, is a flower. There's other types of teas that are called jasmine that are mixed with green tea, but this is jasmine pearls, the actual flower itself. That's a relaxant. It's got anti-cancer properties. It has a compound called jasminate that's been studied, um, but it has a lot of benefits. Also great for immune system. I put this in my Vigilante, which is our immune system support tea, and really, really great tea when mixed with others. Coriander and fennel. This is often a way to get birds to drink because the essential oils that are part of these seeds will float to the top and create a little oil slick like what we saw earlier. So, and sometimes that's what gets birds going. So coriander and fennel are great for digestive health, also anti-inflammatory because of those essential oils. Tulsi is the second most exported product out of India. It's so popular because it has so many health benefits. Tulsi is also known as holy basil. It's not basil, it's holy basil. But Tulsi has compounds that are adaptogenic, which helps the nervous system. It helps calm the nervous system so that they're more easily transitioned to change, which, let's face it, a lot of our birds struggle with change. So that's a really big benefit. And also an immunomodulator. An overactive immune system is just as dangerous as an underactive immune system. So having that immunomodulator, those compounds that help balance the immune system are important. So Tulsi has a lot of benefits. I use it in a lot of stuff. I used it in my green forage as well as some of the teas because it has so many benefits. Turmeric and black pepper. So some of you probably who are watching this probably have read something about turmeric and that it's not easily absorbed by animal digestion. But when you mix it with black pepper, particularly because of the component of black pepper called piperine, that helps absorb turmeric by about 200%. So turmeric has a lot of really great benefits. Sometimes you'll find it as curcumin, which is the extract from the turmeric root, mixed with black pepper. But we brew them whole. We just put the entire root and the entire peppercorn in there and let them brew together as part of some of the teas. Probably
I
one of
feel
the
like
best anti-inflammatories there is. Yeah.
I was gonna say I feel like this is one of the big winners, and that we're finding more and more evidence of how powerful this is. So good, another one that's good for you and your bird.
Absolutely. So that's kind of a survey of some of my favorites. I use a lot of other types of components. I use moringa, which is they classify that as a superfood sometimes in pop culture, but very nutrient rich leaf, as well as other types of seeds, including milk thistle. Milk
Mhm.
thistle is probably one of the most commonly prescribed liver supports by vets, by avian vets. I can't, is it called SAM-E? I think the product, the pharmaceutical, I think it's called SAM-E, but
It might be.
it's milk thistle extract. But you can brew the seed as part of the tea. And then what they have found is that milk thistle not only protects from liver damage, but also helps regenerate liver tissue to some extent, which is really difficult. Once the liver is damaged, that's pretty much it. So having that regenerative type of ability is really outstanding. It also helps with those filtering organs like kidney and bladder. But silymarin is the flavonoid that's present in the seed that helps milk thistle protect the liver. And silymarin is what they would call milk thistle extract. That's what they would use in that pharmaceutical product. So brewing, cold brewing's easiest because you can just throw it in throw the dry tea in the water and let it steep overnight. You can do that on the counter or in the refrigerator, it doesn't matter. And then strain off what you're not going to use and throw it in their food, their wet food with their sprouts or whatnot. If you're going to use hot water, always use hot but never boiling. Um, there's a reason why tea kettles whistle, and then you take the tea kettle off the heat because you got to let that water cool a little bit before you use it. So cold brewing is better, but hot brewing is okay as long as the water's not too hot. Tea should always be cool when you're offering it to your bird. I never, ever, ever recommend feeding anything to birds that is warm.
Yep.
Warm kicks
Unless they're
hormones
hand
in.
feeding a baby.
Yeah, yeah. Hand feeding is different, but when it comes to offering your adult birds warm things, do not offer them warm food, do not offer them warm drinks. That will kick them into hormone more times than not. So we don't need that. The Association of Avian Veterinarians just last year put something out about that, like warm or mushy food should not be fed. So don't do that. Um, don't use tea bags, only use stainless steel infusers. Tea bags have been found to have microplastics, among other things. A lot of tea bags are bleached as well. And also, there's some evidence that what companies are selling in their tea bag that's ground up is not necessarily what you're buying. So, I think there's been some DNA evidence as far as, you know, I'm buying chamomile, but I don't think that's what it's in here. So they'll flavor the teas so that
Mhm.
you're buying something that's actually really, really cheap.
Wow.
I offer only whole leaf tea. So everything you see in the bag of bird tea, you can see what it is. You can see the flowers, you can see the leaves, you can see exactly what's in there. And that's exactly what you should be doing. If the animal is suspicious, and let's face it, we've all had that bird that does the one eye over the bowl, like, what are you trying to do here? Steep the tea for a shorter period of time. When I introduce tea to new birds, I'll often throw some tea leaves in the bottom of their water bowl, give them their water, and then over the course of the day, it slowly steeps and the water gets a little bit tinted. And so it's kind of that gradual introduction, and that's fine too. But a lot of the times it's a matter of giving your bird tea socially. So if you're drinking a cup of tea, give them their own cup. I had that same eclectus I talked about earlier. He would not drink tea from his water. Like, he made soup from his water. No one else was allowed to put anything
Yeah.
in his water.
Nobody else
So
could make the soup.
no. That's his job. So I gave him a wide bottomed mug that he couldn't tip, and he would drink tea out of that all day long, presumably because he saw me drinking that. So, keeping birds is a scientific experiment that never ends, and this is one way to do it, is how to offer it. So, sometimes it's more dilute, sometimes it's the vessel that you're offering it in. Some teas you can actually spray on the birds too. I use my Plumage Perfection tea as a spray. There's nothing in there that's going to stain the bird per se. There are some teas with hibiscus or rose hips or rose petals or black tea that will stain your bird, so I don't recommend spraying those on your birds. But this one has calendula and chamomile and some other teas that lavender that are very smell wonderful, and you can spray it on your bird. If you have a plucker, you can put it right on their skin, spray right on their skin, and that'll be great topically as well. But it is a food. Tea is a food. It's a whole food, so you definitely want to avoid spoilage by refrigerating that spray bottle when you're not using it, and only using it for a few days and then tossing it. I recommend substituting tea for water part of the day. I offer tea in the morning with fresh foods. When I pull fresh foods in the evening, whatever's left from the day, and I switch it out with dry food, I offer just clean water. So they have clean water for part of the day, but they have tea in the morning. They have tea starting in the morning. Whatever I want my birds consuming, they get in the morning. I pull all food at bedtime so that the first thing in the morning that they have access to is what I want them to eat, which is soaked and sprouted items, fruit and veg, and things like that in their tea. There are zoos who do a whole month of tea on and a whole month of tea off, and they just go back and forth that way. I prefer to have some consistency in the birds' lives so that they expect it. I think a month off of something can be really problematic for most parents. So
Yeah. Well, when they're, you see them drinking in the wild out of those catchments, they're getting exposed to those tannins regularly. So that makes sense.
yep. So never completely replace water with tea within a day. They should have some water part of the day. I don't recommend both water and tea at the same time in the cage because typically they're going to come to depend on one or the other.
One or the other,
So
yeah.
have tea in there when they have their fresh food for the day. If you come home from work and you pull whatever's left from the fresh food and you switch it out with dry food, that's when they can have some fresh water. And then a lot of herbal teas can be added to the food as well. Now, once again, brewing is better. Brewing is the best. But you can also add any of these to their wet foods. When we do this with turtles and tortoises, for example, the rhinos, the lemurs, other birds will, with toucans, will roll it into their produce. So with toucans, they're eating a lot of fruit, so we'll roll the tea into their fruit. It sticks to the fruit. With turtles and tortoises and rhinos and things like that into their browse, into the leaves, the wet leaves, and it'll stick to that. So when they're consuming it, they're actually taking in some of the tea as well. One of the institutions I worked for in Chicago did a spa day. So once a week, they had a spa day for all their turtles and tortoises, and they soaked them in my teas. And they were like, our beta carotene levels in their, like in the blood work were significantly higher than the other institution that they were working with. And so that other institution was like, how are you getting your beta carotene levels so high? And they're like, we're soaking them in tea. It's beneficial. So yeah.
Well, they do that cloacal drinking, so that's a whole other, yeah.
Well,
Interesting.
and just drinking, yeah, I mean just drinking
Yeah,
in
no,
general,
well, they do
absorption,
both
yeah,
ways, yeah.
totally. Yeah. So, like I said, brewing is best, feeding is secondary, but you can do both. Any way that you can maximize the ingestion of these tea components is going to be beneficial for your birds. I want to thank Dr. Becker because a little over 20 years ago, she brought this health trend to us as bird owners, and ever since I've been working on this and continually improving my formulations so that everybody's birds can benefit. And now we have biobirdblends.com, which you can, I have tea information on there, so you can actually read about teas and brewing and things like that as well. So yeah, that's it for now.
Send us any comments or questions you guys have. Thanks for
Yes.
listening.
Yes, and if there's things that you have questions about that you want us to expand on in a future episode, make sure you drop that in the comments. So good to see you, Evie. As
Good to see you.
always.
Always a lot of fun.
Yep. So for Go Wild, your avian nutrition podcast, I am Jason Crean.
And Dr. Evie Voltura.
And we'll see you next time.